In today's video, I want to make an environment entirely within geometry nodes, and I'm going to show you how to do this. So let's just get started. I'm going to delete the default cube, add in a plane, and that is going to be my geometry nodes object. So I'm going to go over to the geometry nodes editor and add in a new geometry node setup and call this landscape. All right, and in here is where we are going to do most of the work. So we could start off with a geometry node input of geometry, which is the plane, but we could also just start with nothing. So we just have an object that's a placeholder, and in here we're going to add everything we need. And for this video, I think I'm going to do that. It's not really much different than just using the plane, but it's cool to know. So I'm going to add in a grid node because you don't have a plane in geometry nodes. That is the grid. And this is just a plane. You can change the size here. So that's really nice. We can do this procedurally. And the vertices as well. So this is the subdivision. If you leave this at 2, it will just be the normal plane, the default plane. I'm going to set the size to about 25 meters. And we are going to be working with real world scale, since that just works better with assets and scattering that on here. All right, so now we have our ground plane with our 2 vertices. We could subdivide it here. You could also add in a subdivide mesh node after this. For me, I think 100 vertices is fine. Normally, I would add in a displace modifier to displace the terrain, or just do it with my proportional editing tool. But right here, we can use noise textures, and that is pretty cool. So we can Shift A, add in a noise texture, and Shift A and add in a set position node, and put it in between the grid and the output. The set position node, what it will do is it will give a offset to the vertices. So if I set the offset to 0.6, for example, it will move up by 0.6. And as you can see, that works like this. And it does this for every vertex individually. So if we use a noise texture where the values are not the same everywhere, like this value here, you will see that it becomes random, or just with the noise texture. Right now you will see it sideways. That's just because we are offsetting in the X, Y, and Z direction. So we need to fix that and add in a combine XYZ node. In the combine XYZ, a vector is just split up into 3 inputs, and we can just use the Z input for that to move it up. Now with the scale, we can play with this and just do what we would normally do with displacement or the displace modifier. If you want to intensify the displacement, you can add a math node and put it in between the combine XYZ and the noise texture, and then set this to multiply, and you will make the effect more intense. What you might also notice is if you have this multiply node, it will move up. If you don't want that, you can do something a little bit different, and that is just setting this to multiply add. And then in this multiplier, you can set how much you want to multiply with. And then in this add end, you want to subtract half of your multiplier. So for me right now, that's -5. And this will make sure that it's in the middle right here. If we add in our group input, now what we can do is just add the multiplier in here, and then the add end as well. And then just so we can change it with one value, add in a multiply by -0.5. And that will make sure that it is just the same. We can rename it here and call this displacement or something. Just the displacement strength maybe. And then in the modifier, you can change it here. And that will work really seamlessly. All right, so that's really nice. Now we can play with the detail, for example, or the roughness, whatever you want to do. Just change that in the noise texture. What I found is that the default noise texture is really nice for a forest ground. So I'm going to use that for our forest. In this forest, I also want to add in a river. And there's not really a way to do that with a noise texture, but maybe we can do a wave texture and then subtract it from it. So we are going to be trying that. So just move this over here, add in a wave texture. And to preview these nodes, you need to have Node Wrangler enabled, and then Control-Shift left mouse button, and you will get this viewer. And this viewer will not show anything right now because we don't have geometry to put the value on, but now it does. So yeah, this is pretty much what I wanted. Just one line in the middle. We could maybe make this a little bit smaller, just so the edges are white and the middle is just black. All right, so this will be our river, and we can just subtract that from the set position. So probably right here, add in a math node, and set this to subtract. Or no, that will do the opposite. We need to maybe add it on there. And this works, but it's really gradual. I want it to be more intense. So you can add in a math node again. All right, so this arc10 works really well with our river. It's nice and smooth, and it gives some control for the width of the river. So I'm going to set it to 0.1 for now, and then just put that into the group input right here. So now we have a place for our river. We have the forest ground. We have some controls here, and that should be pretty much it for our ground. Maybe just increase the vertices here, just so you have some more detail. Now, with a river, we also want some water, and we could use just a grid and just move it up to indicate where the water should be. So with the arc10 operation right here and adding that onto the displacement, it put the river bottom at 0 and then the rest at 1 or 2, just a little bit higher up. So that's really perfect for our water plane. We can just indicate how high it should be. So for our water plane, we're just going to duplicate the grid, and this will be just the water. We can add in a join geometry node because we need to, well, join these together. Put that in here. And right now you will see this plane appear. This doesn't need to have 200 vertices. I'm just going to go back to 2, and it should be the same size. And then with a set position node again, we can just change how high it is. So 1 for now I think is good. I can just change the width here. I'm going to add in another combine XYZ node just so we can change this in the group input here. All right, so that's the water plane. Just for later, we're going to add in a set material node in between these two as well, just so we can define the water material and then the ground material. And that is it for the ground. Right now we are going to go over to scattering, and we just need to import some assets for that. I have a lot of videos about making your own or where you can get them for free. But so for now, I'm just going to use Botanic, a paid add-on, and Gscatter. And if you really want to learn how to make nature assets, you can watch one of my previous videos, and I'll probably make more in the future as well. All right, so I'm going to add in a lot of grass. I also want some dead grass, some dry grass, just all the grass I can get. And make sure this is in one collection, all the grass, because we are going to be using that later. For realism, it's really important that you use a lot of different assets and also a lot of different layers. So make sure you have that. Always nice to have some rocks in a river. So I'm going to add in a lot of rocks as well. I think for this scene, I'm going to make a pine forest. So I might need to change up my assets a little bit just to reflect that. All right, so now I have my assets here. As you can see, I have a bunch of collections, and we can just hide this if we don't want to see them. But I think for now, that's fine. You won't see this in the runner anyway. So yeah, it's perfectly fine. All right, so now in the geometry nodes editor, we can just add in some scattering. In the last video, I showed you how to do this as well. But in this video, I'm going to show you again. So if you don't want to see this, just skip ahead. But what you want to do is we want to grab this plane here, the ground plane, which is this one after the shade smooth. And I just want to add in some scattering after that. So I'm going to drag off this shade smooth node and add in a distribute points on faces node. And this is where we are going to do our scattering. So I can bring everything back here. That's all nice. And this will be a separate part of our scattering. So with this distribute points on faces, if you preview it, you will see just points appearing along our ground plane. And on these points, we are going to place assets. That's basically how the scattering is going to work. We also want to join this together with the other geometry. So just add in another join geometry node and then just set that here. And here we can change the density. For example, for the trees, we want a little bit less. So we can change that here. On these points, we want the instances, so we need the collection. We can just click and drag one of these collections and just drag it in here for the collection info node. Make sure you set this to relative and then separate children. We're going to be using that later. Then after this distribute points on faces, we want to instance on points. So we're going to add in that node as well, instance on points, and put the instances in here. And that's going to be really laggy because the density is pretty high. So 0.1 or maybe even lower will be fine. Or we might want to change the scale of our landscape. And now we have our trees on the plane. But as you might be able to see, yeah, probably right here, these are not one tree, it's all of the trees combined. So we need to click pick instance, and that will also speed up our viewport a little bit more. And we also want this to be random because right now there is a pattern in this. This might not be very noticeable, but it's just a good practice to make this a random value. And you can change the scale here. And that's about it. The rotation maybe. If you want, you can drag off the rotation here. Then combine X, Y, Z. You want to change the Z value to random maybe. So add in a random value and set the min to 0 and the max to 360. And then just put that into the Z. And that's going to be our scattering. It's really simple, but we don't really need anything more. So yeah, that's fine. So we can just hide these a little bit. And then if we drag this collection info out, we can just select everything here, hit Ctrl G and group it. And right now we can just reuse this for all of our other collections. If we hit the shield icon, we are making sure that it doesn't disappear when we are not using it. And we can just call this trees. In here, I want to change the density, the seed, and I want to connect this seed to all of these other seeds. And this integer here, we need to change to 4 because we have 5 trees. So we need to change that to 4 because the 0 counts as well. We might also want to change the scale. So I'm going to add in another combine XYZ and then just connect that over here and rename that to scale here. By the way, if you're not sure what buttons I'm pressing, it will be here. So you can just follow along. For the N panel right here, I just press N and I can rename everything here. Just duplicate this and make this new by pressing that 2 icon and calling this grass. And then just duplicating the collection info or dragging it in from here. And make sure you set everything to relative and separate children and connect this up again. And then join them with the join geometry. And as you can see, the grass is now appearing inside of the trees. You can just play with the scale or the seed for that. And of course you want some more grass, so increase the density. If you have massive hills like this and you see your grass is just pointing up, we can go back into the grass scattering and make sure for the rotation we are using the normal and put it into the rotation, and it should all just move along with the ground plane here. And also make sure in the random value every time you change it to the amount you have. So for me that's 10 grass here, so set that to 9. Maybe just even put it into the group input. And then just repeat this for all of your other collections. All right, so now I've added in everything and it looks really cluttered now. That's because it is, of course. And that's really nice. We can play with the densities to see, yeah, how much we want everywhere of everything. So for example, I might want less plants, so I can change that. Or I want a little bit less of these miscellaneous things and things like that. Now we have all of this scattered. If we go into rendered mode and for the time being, just disable the scene world to get some default lighting, you will see we have some nice ground here. And you might be able to notice some things that need to be adjusted. That will look really cool. What I want to do now, because we have the ground and the scattering complete, I want to clean up the node graph a little bit because this is, I don't really like these connections going over each other. So I'm just going to select everything and then with control, make sure everything is on the grid and just hide these collection infos because you don't really need to look at them. And then what I want to do is just with a shift selected, or shift pressed and right mouse button, I want to add in these connections and kind of make it a little bit cleaner. So that's nice. We can also hit Ctrl J to make this a frame so we can move everything all at once, which is really nice. And we can do that with these ones as well. So that's a really nice organizing tip. And now what I want to do is make sure that we have some variations in the density. For example, the rocks I want to be bigger and also more dense in the areas underneath the water plane. And we can do that within geometry nodes as well. What we can do is just get kind of a intersection with this water plane, and everything below it should be bigger. Because what we can do now is add in a position node and then do a separate XYZ. And then if we preview our plane right here, and then the value of the separate XYZ, the Z value right here, we can see a nice gradient appear. And if we just put this 1 meter above, you will see everything above the water plane. We are going to be doing some vector math and then just adding 1, or yeah, basically just this combine XYZ here. And instead of adding to this, we should subtract. So yeah, there's nothing below the water plane. One thing to keep in mind though is because this is black doesn't really mean that it's 0 necessarily. This could also be, and it is, a negative value. At the bottom here, we are subtracting just 1 meter. So that means we are subtracting 1 from 0, which would give -1. If you don't want that, just add in a clamp node. It's just really easy. You can, yeah, just clamp it down right here. So this is what we are going to be using for the rocks. And now what we want to do is kind of invert this. So to do that, you can just use a map range node, and this will also clamp, and then just set the to min to 1 and then the to max to 0. And this will be flipped. And now we can use this to multiply the rocks, or the size of the rocks. So right here in the scaling, we can just put this value. Let's move it over here and then get this map range into the scale of the rocks. If we now preview this, you will see the rocks being big here and then just being small here. So we need to do some math to kind of make this a little bit better. If we set the scale to 1, we probably want the rest to be a little bit bigger. So just add 1 to it. Just so wherever this value is 0, the rocks will still have a scale of 1. And then wherever they are in the river, just have a scale of 2. And we can do the same for the density. Right now it's set at 1. So we probably want a little bit more, so we can just use the same value here to have a little bit more rocks in the river, as you can see, and then not as much on the land. All right, so that is it for the rocks, and we can pretty much just use the same thing for the weeds if you want to do that as well. I don't think I'm going to be doing that, so this is fine, but you could do that if you wanted to. Anyways, I think this is pretty much just it. We have a nice forest here. Oh, one thing we do need to fix is these trees in the middle of the river. So we can just go over to the trees and just kind of preview this plane again. Preview this value. All right, so we need to subtract this from the density. So just add in a math node. And then the top value should be the density you want. So for us, that is a pretty small value. And then the bottom value should be this color ramp here. And that could go in the density. And I think that should be it. Not quite. Let's see, what did I do wrong? Oh, subtract, of course. Yeah, I had to subtract instead of add. So now the trees don't come close to the river and everything is nice and procedural. And yeah, you can just connect everything you want to the group input. For example, all these densities and these seeds, you can all put them in the group input. Anyways, we still need to add the dirt and the water. And I'm just going to use some pre-existing shaders for this. Nothing crazy. We're not going to make that here. All right, so now I'm going to choose the plane and then just add in a new material. Call this dirt, and then add in my dirt material. Dirt right here. I just put it into the surface, and it shouldn't change anything. But now if we go back to the geometry nodes right here, and then we set our material on the ground plane, you should see it in the render as well. And now we just need a water material as well. And then we're all done. Make sure you add that to the material. Probably don't need to, but it's always nice to have in the material. And then geometry nodes, and just put that material in here. And there is our water. By the way, if your water, for example, like mine here, needs volumetrics as well. You can just extrude your plane in the geometry node. So water plane here. You can just add in extrude geometry or extrude mesh, put it behind the set position. And if you then just set the offset to minus how high it is, so the water now goes to 0, we can add in a math node right here, make some space for it. Just set this to multiply and then minus 1, and then just get the river height and put that into the top value. So now it will be made negative and it will just extrude the other way. So we can just add in a joint geometry node before the material. So right here, and then just add in the set position as well. And this will just cap it off. And then make sure to add in a merge by distance node as well. And now this should look good. Yeah, now we have the top face again. All right, so yeah, that is pretty much it. Just increase the density and just make a really nice render. So if you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.